am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually a children's book author as well as an editor. I've written books. Some of my books are A Wish for a Pangolin and A Letter from Tashi. And also I have a book about a giraffe called Ty the Quiet Giraffe. But today I'm going to be reading a book that I did not write. This book is called Periwinkles Journey, and it is written by Judy Peterson Fleming and Susie Spafford. And I actually didn't write the story, but I did help out with writing the story. I served as what you call an editor for this story. And an editor is somebody who helps an author make their stories even better, and gives them ideas and suggestions for ways to do that. Kind of like when you are in class and you let your teacher read your story. Your teacher probably has some good ideas of how to make it better. Or I know a lot of times you might share a story with a classmate, and your classmate can serve as an editor for you too. So when I write books myself, I have other people look at my books and my stories so that I can make my stories better too. We all help each other out that way. So I had a lot of fun working on this book with my friends Judy and Susie, and it's all about a penguin named Periwinkle. And when I was working on this book, I learned so many cool things about penguins. Penguins are things that I never knew about until I started working on this book. So before I start reading, I thought maybe it'd be fun to share some of those cool facts that I learned while I was working on this book, and then we'll read the story together. All right, so I'm going to switch over to a slideshow so you can see some photos while I share my facts. All right, hopefully everybody can see my penguin fun facts slides. What you see on the screen here is an illustration of all of the different kinds of penguins. I had no idea there were so many different kinds. Now, most scientists agree that there are 17 different species or kinds of penguins, but not all scientists completely agree with the number 17. Some scientists think it's maybe 18 or 19, but I'd say that most scientists think that there are 17 different kinds of penguins. I had no idea. You probably would recognize a lot of those. So for example, the emperor penguin, that's kind of a famous type of penguin. And that kind lives in Antarctica. You might also recognize a penguin called the king penguin, which looks actually a lot like the emperor penguin, but it's a little smaller. One of my favorite kinds of penguins is a chin strap penguin, because he's called the chin strap because he looks like he's wearing a strap under his chin, almost like she's wearing a bike helmet. I think that that's kind of cute. Now, penguins are birds, and you probably already know that. So birds don't have hair, they have feathers. But I have to say, some of these types of penguins sure look like they've got some funny looking hairdos, like the macaroni penguin, or like the Fjordland penguin. He kind of looks like he's got big bushy eyebrows. I think those are kind of funny. But by far, my favorite hairdo of any of the penguins belongs to the rockhopper. And when a rockhopper wants attention, it will shake its head feathers to get attention from everybody. So I think those guys have some really awesome hairdos. I love them. Other penguins have some really unique special traits about them too. So for example, there is a penguin that has yellow eyes. Now I have to say, the name of the penguin isn't the most creative. It's just called the yellow-eyed penguin, but the yellow eyes are what's pretty cool about this penguin. Another penguin has blue feathers. And again, it's not the most creative name, but it is called the little blue penguin. Some people just call those penguins just blue penguins. If you take a look back at that illustration that I showed you at the beginning, I bet you can find that little blue penguin pretty easily in the illustration, because it's the only penguin, there it is, that doesn't have black and white feathers. It has blue feathers. It's pretty different. Another special thing about the little blue penguin is that it is the smallest of the penguins. The biggest is the emperor penguin, and the smallest is the little blue. And I put these pictures together because when a little blue penguin is all grown up, it's only about the size of that emperor chick. So you can kind of see how much smaller it is than the biggest of the penguins. Pretty neat. I bet a lot of you know that there are penguins that live in Antarctica. Antarctica is the continent that is at the very bottom of the earth. So in fact, if you were in this little spaceship and you happen to fly underneath the planet and look up, that's what you would see. You would see the continent of Antarctica. And it looks like it's just a bunch of ice, but believe it or not, there's land underneath that. And it's mostly covered in a lot of ice and snow. Now, you would be right to say that there are penguins that live in Antarctica, but actually not all of them live there. In fact, I think it's only about 7 different types of penguins that live in Antarctica. Well, what is for sure is that all penguins live on or below this red line that goes around the earth. Now, that red line isn't really there. It's just an imaginary line. It's kind of like the earth wearing a belt around its waist. And I bet a lot of you probably already know the name of that line that runs around the middle of the earth. Starts with an E. And if you said equator, you are right. So one thing that all penguins have in common is that they all live on or below the equator. The equator is an imaginary line. It divides the earth into 2 parts, like a top half and a bottom half. And we call that bottom half the southern hemisphere. So they all live on the equator or in the southern hemisphere. And you might think, when I think of penguins, I think they all live in the ice and snow, but that's not true either. This is another map of the world. And all of the blue shaded area is where you can kind of find penguins around the world. But again, there's Antarctica down at the bottom. And there are a lot that live on or near there, but not all of them. In fact, this kind of penguin is a Galapagos penguin. And it definitely doesn't live in the ice or snow. In fact, it lives right on the equator, right there in the Galapagos Islands. So it's kind of a tropical penguin, which I thought was pretty neat. I didn't know that before I worked on this book. And there are penguins that even live in Africa. These penguins live on the beach, and they live in the southern part of Africa right there. They're called the African penguins. Little blue penguins, which I talked about earlier, live in Australia and New Zealand, which is right about there. So they don't all live in the ice and snow. A couple of other cool fun facts that I learned about penguins is that they don't fly. They're birds, but they don't fly. I bet some of you already knew that. But what they do with their wings is they use them like fins, and they are actually excellent swimmers. They also can use their fins to help push themselves on the ice and snow. So the penguins that live in the ice and snow, to get around faster, they slide on their bellies and they can propel themselves with their wings. If they're on a hill, they can just slide down. They call this tobogganing. So that's pretty cute when you see those penguins sliding on their bellies. Another fun fact that I learned about penguins is that when one penguin likes another penguin, some penguins will give that penguin a little pebble as a gift. And if it's a female penguin, she will sometimes take that pebble and put it into her nest. And one thing that's kind of unusual is when I think of birds' nests, I think of something that's made out of leaves and twigs and that kind of thing. But a lot of penguins don't live in places that have trees and leaves and twigs. So they make their nests kind of out of unusual things. Like this chinstrap penguin makes a nest out of rocks. And this penguin on the right doesn't have any rocks or any leaves or twigs to make a nest out of. So they make a nest out of its feet. That's what emperor penguins do. And they put their egg on its feet, and then they put their belly and their feathers on top of the egg to keep the egg warm. So that was, I thought, kind of a neat fun fact about penguins too. So now that I've had a chance to share a few fun facts with you about penguins, when we're reading the story, I'll stop sharing now. When we're reading the story, I bet you're going to find some fun facts in the story as we read it. So, are you ready to go? Me too. Okay, Periwinkles Journey. It was spring in Australia when Periwinkle, the little blue penguin, looked up. Albatross had dropped a letter at her feet. "Special delivery," he announced. Periwinkle picked up the letter and ran to show her best friend, Petey Platypus. And the letter says, "From Crystal to Periwinkle." "Petey," she shouted, "I got a letter, I got a letter." "Well, open it already," he cried. "It's a birthday party invitation from my cousin Crystal in Antarctica," said Periwinkle. And here's the invitation. It says, "Come to my birthday party. Meet all of our 17 penguin cousins." And look, here are all the 17 different species or kinds of penguins. Here's Periwinkle, the little blue. It says, "Where? Antarctic Peninsula. When? The second full moon of the summer. Signed, Crystal." And here's Crystal. She is an emperor penguin. "Oh, look, there you are," said Petey. It was easy to find Periwinkle. She was the only blue penguin in the group. Periwinkle grew quiet. Gosh, she thought, I'm different from the rest. Later that day, Periwinkle showed the invitation to her mother. "But Mama, they're black and white and bigger." Mama smiled at Periwinkle. "Now remember what I always say. It's not how you look on the outside. It's what's inside that matters." The next morning, Petey came over to play. "Say, Petey, do you know where Antarctica is?" Periwinkle asked. Petey didn't have a clue. "Let's go ask Mr. Wendell. He knows everything." Oh, this must be Mr. Wendell. I think he's a koala. Mr. Wendell was in his classroom when they arrived. "Here we are in Australia," he said, pointing to the globe. "And Antarctica is way down at the bottom. It's all covered in ice and snow." "Brrr," shivered Petey. "Will there be polar bears down there?" asked Periwinkle. "Don't worry," Mr. Wendell assured her. "Polar bears live only at the top of the earth in the Arctic." And here's a little picture of two polar bears talking. One says, "Have you ever seen a penguin?" Another guy says, "Nope." And then down here, we have two penguins talking. "Any polar bears here?" "Nope, no polar bears ever." And that is true. So polar bears and penguins do not live together. One lives near the North Pole and the other lives in the South Pole. And some people kind of get that mixed up. So they never are in danger of getting hurt by a polar bear. "Whew," said Periwinkle. She was relieved, but still a little scared. The next day, Albert the Albatross was back. "Ahoy, Periwinkle! Meet Rocky Rockhopper from New Zealand." "Hello, cousin," called Rocky. "Ready to ride with me to Antarctica?" "Did you say ride? Way up high in the sky?" Periwinkle's eyes opened wide. "Sure," said the Albatross. "It's too far to swim, and everyone knows that penguins can't fly." "You can do it, Periwinkle," assured Rocky. Soon it was time for them to go. "Periwinkle," Mama said, "I made you a hat to help keep you warm." Then she slipped a special necklace over Periwinkle's head. "And this will remind you to be brave." Periwinkle touched the beautiful seashell. "I feel braver already," Periwinkle chirped. Then Mama turned to Rocky. "You should wear a hat too," she started. "Oh, no, no, no," he squealed, shaking his head. "We rockhoppers never wear hats. They just mess up our head feathers." Everyone laughed. Periwinkle's heart beat fast as she climbed aboard Albert's swing. After giving hugs all around, she said goodbye to her warm weather friends and family. Then Albert lifted off. Periwinkle held on tight. "Now departing for Antarctica. Next stop, Cape Point, Africa," Albert announced. "Africa?" shouted Periwinkle and Rocky. "Yep," Albert called. "Your African cousin needs a ride too." Oh boy. They flew for days and days. Periwinkle often held the shell necklace from Mama, which reminded her to be brave. At night, they rested on the ocean's surface. The waves rocked them to sleep. At last, Africa appeared below. Cousin Cappy was calling them from the shoreline. "Hee-haw, hee-haw," Cappy said, sounding just like a donkey. And that's a true story. African penguins do sound a little bit like a donkey. They honk like that. "I thought you'd never get here." The three cousins made their way to Cappy's rookery. Suddenly, Cappy stopped. Several Cape fur seals were sleeping. "Shh," she whispered. "The seals get really grumpy if you wake them up." Cappy's home was filled with trinkets and treasures and piles of rocks. What a collection she had! Cappy showed them a beautiful sparkling diamond. "I'm giving this to Crystal for her birthday." "Here's my present," replied Rocky. He held up a green jade stone from New Zealand. Periwinkle gazed sadly at the pretty stones. "Oh no, I forgot to bring a gift." "Don't worry," said Cappy. "You can give her this." She plucked a shiny blue stone from her collection and tucked it into Periwinkle's backpack pocket. "It's blue, just like your feathers," Cappy smiled. Periwinkle cheered up. "Oh, thank you, Cappy." Night fell over Cape Point. A million stars sparkled in the African sky. Albert settled on a nearby rock. Cappy and Rocky were asleep too, but Periwinkle was wide awake. "I wish I were black and white too," she thought. Then, holding her seashell, Periwinkle remembered Mama's words. "It's not how you look on the outside that counts." Periwinkle sighed. Soon, she was fast asleep. The next morning, it was time to go. "Climb aboard and buckle up," Albert announced. But every time Albert tried to lift off, he couldn't get up in the air. Now that there were 3 penguins on the swing, it was just too heavy. "What are we going to do?" cried Periwinkle. "Don't worry, we'll figure out a way," said Albert. "Wait here, I'll be right back." The cousins watched Albert fly out over the waves. "Look, it's a pod of humpback whales on their way to Antarctica," Cappy exclaimed. When Albert flew back, he was all smiles. "The humpback whales will swim with you the rest of the way." "Will you come too?" Periwinkle hoped. Albert shook his head. "No, I'll meet you in Antarctica." The humpback whales were happy to have the penguins' company. The penguins swam fast like little torpedoes. The whales were amazed. One morning, Cappy heard whale sounds coming from the deep. "Listen," she said, "the whales are singing for us." The 3 penguins giggled as they swam and danced to the whale song. Then they heard honking from across the water. It was Crystal with some of the cousins. They were in Antarctica at last. Periwinkle raced Rocky and Cappy for the icy shore. 1, 2, 3, they popped onto the ice. "Welcome to Antarctica," Crystal honked. Giggling with excitement, the penguin cousins gathered together. One by one, they waddled up to a big map to show where they were from. Then there was a pause. Crystal looked around. Where's Galapagos Gus? He couldn't find a ride, honked Harry the Humboldt penguin. Everyone was a little sad. Once everybody got settled, it was time for the party. Let's play Follow the Penguin, suggested Crystal. She led the penguins down the ice, sliding and shouting, Whee! Periwinkle had never had so much fun. Suddenly, there was a loud cry overhead. Wait for me! Albatross was carrying a special delivery. Out tumbles a bundle, all wrapped up in scarves, flapping its flippers. Galapagos Gus, you made it after all, cried Crystal. I would never miss your party, he exclaimed, wrapping a pink scarf around Crystal. I thought you could use this. It's freezing down here, he honked. After seeing the present from Galapagos Gus, each cousin presented Crystal with a special gift. Rocky's pretty green stone was a big hit. Next, it was Cappy's turn. Crystal's eyes lit up. How beautiful! It sparkles just like the ice we live on. Thank you, Cappy. Periwinkle went to look for the shiny blue stone for Crystal, but it was gone. It must have fallen out on our long swim from Africa, Periwinkle realized. What should I do? Periwinkle was so sad. She didn't want to be the only cousin without a gift. Then she thought of the shell necklace. But she loved it, and Mama had made it just for her. It had helped her be so brave. Slowly, she took off the necklace and presented it to Crystal. Happy birthday, Periwinkle said softly. For me? Asked Crystal. I've never had such a special gift, and from such a special penguin. You mean I'm special? Asked Periwinkle. But I'm so different. I'm not black and white like everyone else. I'm blue, she muttered. Why would you want to be like everyone else? Crystal asked. Periwinkle looked around. One penguin had a chin strap. Another one had stripes going in all different directions. Someone else had yellow eyes. They were all different. You are right, replied Periwinkle. I like my blue feathers. I like being small. I like being me. Yes, Periwinkle, the penguins chimed in together. Only you can be you. Let's huddle together, emperor style, now that we're all here at last, said Crystal. And they did, singing happy birthday to Crystal as the southern lights danced in the sky. Periwinkle had never been so happy and proud to just be herself, a little blue penguin from Australia. And that's the end. Yay! So I hope you enjoyed the story. I certainly loved working on this book. It was a lot of fun, and I loved learning so much about penguins, and also that everybody is special. True story. Everyone is special and unique in their own, very own way, just like Periwinkle. So Ms. Katya, I'm happy to take some questions if anyone has anything, or send it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. We did get a question already from Eli. Eli wants to know, do warm penguins also mix with cold weather ones?
That is a good question. So this book is definitely a fiction story. That means that it is not happening in real life. Penguins don't talk to each other. They don't travel on swings from an albatross bird. But another thing too is that really the warm weather birds don't really mix with the cold weather birds. And it's not so much that the birds can't be together, but they're just, their bodies are designed to live in their own special habitat. So for example, if Galapagos Gus really did go down to Antarctica, he would have a hard time because he's not really built for life in the cold. So not really.
And Eli also asked, are the blue penguins from New Zealand?
Yes, there are blue penguins in New Zealand, and I think there are some in New Zealand and in Australia. This periwinkle happens to be from Australia. That's why her buddy was Petey the platypus. A platypus is also from Australia, and Mr. Wendell is a koala who is also from Australia.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions for Carrie? Oh, what do the blue penguins eat?
That is a good question. Most penguins eat fish, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure actually what blue penguins eat. That's a very good question. I do know that a lot of penguins eat fish. I'd have to learn a little bit more to see what they eat. They do live near the water, so that wouldn't surprise me if they ate some sort of fish, or maybe some like small crustaceans like little crabs or something, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a penguin expert, so not sure.
Well, thank you. I think your book shows that stories are a great way to absorb facts, because we learned so much. Who knew? 17 different kinds of penguins. I have a question.
Yeah.
How many of those 17 kinds of penguins have you seen?
Not nearly enough. Not enough. I know that at the San Diego Zoo they have African penguins. You can go see those guys, and their section called Africa Rocks. It's really neat. It's pretty new habitat for them, so that's really fun to see them. I have seen king penguins in certain aquariums, but not nearly all 17. I've never seen a little blue penguin in person. I think it would be really special to be able to see one of those.
There's still time. And also, a question that we get a lot here in the library is, how does one become a children's book author?
Well, that is a very good question. I think that the best thing to do to become a children's book author is to write and write and write and keep writing. And I started writing stories when I was very little, when I was 4 years old. In fact, probably my stories began not even with words, just with pictures. So I used to spend so much time on my bed growing up with papers, and I'd staple papers together and make my own little stories and draw the pictures. And I think the best thing you can do is to write and write and write, and to start by telling stories that come from your own life, because those are going to be the best stories, the ones that have happened to you. And you can start with that. And I think those make the best stories, because you were there and experiencing them. I was a teacher for many, many years. And so when I grew up, I became a teacher, and I continued to write stories for my students. Sometimes I just really couldn't find the right thing for them to read, so I just write it myself, or I'd write stories for my own children. And then I got lucky, to be perfectly honest. I got very lucky, and I was able to start working on books like Periwinkles Journey. And once I started working on books like this, then I also had the opportunity to start writing my own stories. So I think a lot of it is hard work, keep writing, and maybe have a little bit of luck too.
Great advice. You are a genuine voice. So one child wants to know, why do penguins like cold water?
Well, I think it's that their bodies, first of all, not all penguins like cold water. So Galapagos penguins live in the tropical areas, but it's kind of like any other animal. Why do polar bears like to live in the cold? Well, that's just what their body is designed for. That's their habitat. So that's where their bodies are best built. So they have the penguins that live in cold weather. They're designed to live in cold weather. Their feathers can help repel some of the cold water. They also have food in that cold water area. They eat the fish that are in that cold water. So it's really just where their bodies are designed to live, where they're built to live.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, I'm seeing one in the chat. Do you have an illustrator you work with?
I do. So I work with a variety of illustrators. So I have one in my Tide, the book that I wrote for about giraffe, Tide the Quiet Giraffe. The illustrator for this book is named Barbara Ball. But then I have a different illustrator for my book, A Letter from Tashi, and her name is Jan Smith. And so her style is a little different than Barbara's style. And then I also work with another illustrator named Christina Wald, and she illustrated my book, A Wish for Pangolin. And she's also illustrating another book coming out all about a sloth and the rainforest. So sometimes I'll use I'll work with the same illustrator multiple times. And we team together very well. We have to work very closely because the pictures really are important in being able to tell the story. So we are a very close team when we work together as an illustrator.
Thank you so very much for being here and sharing this wonderful book, Periwinkles Journey, with us. The author of the book, Judy Peterson Fleming and Susie Spafford, are lucky to have worked with you. So I just want to remind everybody to sign up for our next San Diego Zoo Storytime on Thursday, May 13th at 11 in the morning. And you can sign up for that at cplevents.org. And I shared the link to that in the comments. So again, thank you all so much.
Thank you. You can buy my books or Periwinkles Journey at shopzoo.com. That's the San Diego Zoo's online store if you're interested. Thank you so much for having me. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, kids. Bye.